Thank you for pressing start on episode 68 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today, we have 2 secret games, followed by a developer interview and a review of our featured game, Katana Zero. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Po, but it's not only me. There's a guy with a flow who's on a journey. So won't you put your hands together, please, for the Zeo Drifter, the indie game sifter, the curse-cracking mister, DiscoCola. What's going on?
Not much. I'm feeling ecstatic because I've used my precognition to see that this episode and our special guest are totally awesome. How are you?
I feel the same way. I'm doing just fine, my Chronos providing psychiatrists. Those are references to our featured game, Katana Zero, which was picked by our guest, Noah Lone, aka SomeHumbleOnion, the creator of Smushy Come Home, an awesome 3D platformer that I've played and that DiscoCola plans to play in the near future.
Very near future. I should be getting my shipping email any second now, I'm told.
I'm so excited for you. I'm so excited that you get to play that game in the way that you love, which is through a physical version. And sometimes you wait for the physicals.
I do,
Sometimes you have the faith not knowing if they're going to happen, and then they do.
Yeah, it's hard. But you know what helps is playing so many games all the time so that I don't have time for those kind of fun anyway.
We distract ourselves with games. And because we do have a lengthier episode ahead of us, we're going to do a developer interview, and then Noah Lone is going to help us review Katana Zero because he picked it from our list. We're just going to jump right into our secret games. But before we move on, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, thank you. And we love you. If you haven't already, please consider giving us a follow and a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It should only take a second or two, and we'd really love that. And if you have a friend who loves indie games, we would love if you shared our podcast with them as well. It's time for our secret games.
The secret games. Secret games that you're playing. Secret games. The secret games. Secret games. The secret games.
In Secret Games, we take turns reviewing an indie game we've been playing in secret since our last episode. We don't discuss what we're playing in advance, so I don't know what DiscoCola is about to reveal to me that he's been playing. He doesn't know my secret game for this episode. And we can each choose any indie game as long as we haven't reviewed it before, and as long as it's not one of the games on our featured game list. So we'll start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 68 of Underplayed.
All right, my secret game comes from Canary Games, and it is called Lunark.
Lunark. It's not immediately familiar to me.
Lunark, developed by Canary Games and published by WayForward.
Nice.
It is a game that I started last season. I was going to play it, I think, for episode 10 of that season, but I kind of jumped off of it. Lunark is part of the seemingly small subgenre known as the cinematic platformer, which includes games like Prince of Persia, Flashback, Another World, and the one I'm most familiar with is Heart of Darkness.
The one that I thought of was Another World while I was peeking at this trailer just a second ago.
That being said, I've never played a single one of those, and I haven't really wanted to, if I'm honest.
I didn't know about the classic Prince of Persia before I played like Sands of Time and Warrior Within back on the PS2. I thought that was like the first. No, they have roots really deep in that classic side-scrolling, like sort of slower jumping style of platforming.
I knew that Prince of Persia had been around for a little while, but I didn't know that it was anything other than what I was used to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The backstory of Lunark is that the moon, our moon, was turned into a spaceship controlled by something called Noah, and it left Earth's orbit to find the inhabitable planet called Abilrine.
Mm.
An inhabitable planet for
Yeah.
people.
Sure.
In Lunark, you play as Leo. You don't really know too much about him. He does seem to have like these heightened physical abilities, making him especially valuable to locate items that would be like otherwise too dangerous to retrieve. So as a result of this innate ability, you have been working for someone named Gideon over the years. He hires you to locate certain items or whatever. Another unique characteristic of Leo is that despite being quite young, he appears to be aging very rapidly. Mentioning much more about this and his physical prowess would start to get into like spoiler territory. But it is something that people notice, and it's a known phenomenon that affects certain kinds of people. So
Okay.
it's like when they see that on someone that looks young but is aging rapidly, they're like, "Oh, I know what you are. You're this."
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, very early in the story, you return from a mission for Gideon only to find that your ship has a bomb attached to it, and you are being framed for what appears to be a public terrorist attack. And so now you are this like wanted criminal because everyone thinks that you were performing this terrorist attack.
So it's time to run.
Yeah. From there, you can use your physical prowess to traverse this cinematic platformer to uncover the true culprits behind your ship's explosion and learn more about Leo's past. So, kind of synergizing quite well on this front,
Yeah.
at least in theory.
Totally.
Yeah. So, for things I like about Lunark, first and absolutely foremost, the pixel art. The art here is supreme, not just in the overworld sprites, but like the cutscene sprites are incredible. It's a cinematic platformer. Like you got to nail it, or else you didn't do the job. So it looks really good. It's the reason I bought the game because I just thought the pixel art was incredible and I wanted to experience it firsthand. In addition, something I rarely recognize, let alone mention, are the set pieces. We explore a train, we explore a forest, we explore a lava-filled cave, a prison, and more. And all of those different set pieces sort of boosts the memorability of the different chapters of the game. So it's like, oh, chapter 4, that's the train one. I know I'm on the train. Chapter 2, that's the cave.
I would say that's another similarity to today's featured game, Katana Zero.
Yeah, I would say that too.
I know what each of those chapters are when I look at them.
And then in addition to all of that, just the backgrounds are really worthy of praise. Like between parallax scrolling and the level of detail that just goes into every aspect of the individual scenes, I can't ignore the care that went into all of this. I think it rivals the backgrounds of A Space for the Unbound.
That's what I was going to say.
Maybe overtakes them.
I was thinking like 10 out of 10 Sky, just like that game.
Would gaze again.
Would gaze once more.
The music in Lunark is great. I never found a snoozer in the bunch. While some of them may be doing what cinematic music does in supporting the visuals, each song that I do recall sounded good as a standalone track, but also did a lot of work in supporting the visuals. However, beyond music and breathtaking visuals, this is kind of where I have to move into dislikes. First off, on this point, I want to mention the story. While the stories seem to have loads of potential, I did get pretty lost along the way, so maybe this is just me. But I failed to connect all the dots on my first playthrough. This has a lot to do with my complaints about controls and mechanics that I'll mention in a minute, but I spent a lot of time in between big story beats, and because of that, I couldn't remember what my previous revelation was that I just had, because in the span of the game, it's only a short period of time, but it took me like half an hour to get there.
Yeah.
So
it's like, wait, what was going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that happen too.
My next complaint is something that services my previous one. As a very linear and cinematic experience, there are a lot of collectible-based achievements and trophies that are missable on your first playthrough. And I loathe this because of my really big and upcoming complaint. But to the game's credit, because I missed some of these kinds of trophies, I replayed a good number of levels. and I did have a much better experience after having beat the game. So all of this,
okay, because you knew what was going on.
I knew what was going on, and I had a better grasp of the controls. So I can say that if you had a crappy time on the first playthrough, if you're willing to give it another shot, you might have a better time the second time around.
Yeah, that's a relief because sometimes you don't know, like, if I were to revisit this, would it be worse? Would it be the same? And I'm glad that it was at least a little bit more positive.
It's a little bit more positive. I think the checkpoints are kind of rude. They can be really far apart at times. And then if you die, which is easy to do, you're losing a lot of time. Like, especially if you're getting close to the end of the task you're working on and die right at the end before the next checkpoint. I think I turned off the game maybe 2 or 3 times just because I was like, I'm done with that. But that brings me to my last and most supreme complaint is that I hate the controls in this game. I've listened to a few other reviews of Lunark at this point, and from what I gather, it's pretty faithful to that cinematic platformer genre, but maybe that subgenre doesn't really persist for a reason. And I'm thinking of games like Croc, Legend of the Gobos. It's a game that recently had a remaster announced. And I love this game for nostalgic reasons mostly, but when I go back to replay it,
doesn't feel good.
Its age shows bad in the controls. So I'm hoping that when they re-release it, they include those old tank controls as an option, but they modernize it.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like if Lunark is in fact, faithful to the controls of classic cinematic platformers, then maybe just modernize it, man. Make the genre better by modernizing the controls, because the controls just they don't feel good to me. As it stands, unless you really love that old subgenre of game a lot, you will probably approach this game like I did, as an action platformer, and you most definitely cannot treat this game like Mega Man or Hollow Knight or even Omochapon from last season, because if you do, you will die from fall damage more times than you can count.
Well, this review is really helpful for that reason, is just helping to set expectations, because I would have looked at this and thought it was like some of those more action-oriented ones.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was looking forward to, and it did not deliver on that. So yeah, in the end, while I can't really compare Lunark to other similar games in the same subgenre, what I can say is that I did buy the physical of this game expecting high action, skill-based platformer with the awesome pixel art. And while I did love that pixel art, nearly every other aspect of the game left a good amount to be desired. And most of that had to do with just the miserable controls. I did eventually have an easier time navigating the controls after playing the last level, but it took a lot of beating my head against the wall and not understanding how the different levels of jump worked. And so I had to do a lot of trial and error. I had to look some stuff up, and there's not a lot of information or other people that have posted content about this game.
Yeah, this seems like a pretty under the radar sort of game.
Yeah, so it's hard to get the answers you're looking for when no one else has provided them for you. But this is going to sound super rude, but I think some subgenres have died out for a reason, and the reason here might be controls. I loved looking at and listening to Lunark, but I kind of hated playing it. All the same, though, I will still give it a 5.5 out of 10.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, given what you have described. I'm not sure I would seek this out myself, but I do appreciate it, and I think the trailer does sell it as a gorgeous game, and I can believe that the music is really good, too. It just looks like a game that would have great music.
Yeah, and unless you love this kind of game, or you're just you know what? I always disagree with DiscoCola. I'm going to play this game, and I'm going to love it.
Right.
Good for you, man. But otherwise, I'd recommend watching someone else play it. And there are a couple of playthroughs on YouTube.
I will say that I don't think either of us have played a platformer quite like this before.
It's true.
You said, it's not a genre that you find out there a lot anymore, so I don't think we would have had many opportunities to, but I appreciate that you sort of expanded your boundaries a little bit by playing maybe it's, the overall genre isn't new to you, but it is a kind of subgenre that I haven't really touched.
I didn't expand those boundaries on purpose. It was a total accident. I didn't mean to expand my horizons.
But you stuck with it. You stuck with it.
Well, a second time. Yeah. I had to give it a second go.
Now, I think I know the answer to this, but does this make you curious about those precursor cinematic platformer games in any way? Not necessarily to play them, but to look into them?
Not really.
Like
I watched part of a playthrough of Heart of Darkness, and it seems like something that is kind of fun to watch, especially if you have someone that's like struggling and really reactive about it. Like you can get that sort of like comedy aspect out of it. But beyond that, I'm not interested. They look beautiful. Like I think it's the first kind of game that took a gamble on art, like visual art, and then tried to build a game around it. And I appreciate it for that, but that's about the extent of it.
I would love to watch a professional play Another World or classic Prince of Persia or Lunark.
Mm-hmm.
I think I look at these kinds of games and I just know, I'd probably be bad at them, but watching a professional do a fast run, that might be the ticket for me.
I think this is a game that if you practiced at it, you could really impress a lot of people. It's like a party trick, kind of like getting really good at Lunark and knowing all the right times to do all the right jumps. It's a good party trick. So
nice.
It would be fun to watch someone do that, I guess.
Okay.
Because I bet you could beat the game in like an hour and 20 minutes or something if you knew all this stuff.
Maybe that's something I'll look into if it's available online. If it's not available for Lunark, I might look into, have there been, SGDQ, AGDQ runs of the other ones?
Surely.
Okay, where can you play Lunark?
You can play Lunark on Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, Windows, Mac OS, PlayStation 5, and I played the limited run games physical release on PlayStation 4.
Wonderful. It's time for my secret game. My secret game this episode is a cozier game that sort of reminds me of the realm that Smushy Come Home exists in. I picked a platformer game as well, but it's a first-person platformer.
Scary.
It's a game that I have played the demo of.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
And my secret game is called Valley Peaks.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, so you knew.
I know this one. When you said first-person platform, it was the first thing I thought of.
I had previously talked about this on our show because I played it in a Steam Next Fest, and it was one of my favorite games I played that Steam Next Fest. Valley Peaks is a 2024 platformer adventure game. It was developed by Tub Club. I believe it's their first game, and published by Those Awesome Guys, which might be my favorite 1-2 punch of like developer and publisher name, like Tub Club and Those Awesome Guys.
Hanging out in the tub. Hanging out in the tub club.
Awesome guys in the tub. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, embark on a cozy climbing adventure in Valley Peaks, a riveting first-person platformer where each mountain is like a puzzle. Install radio towers at the top of every ridge to connect the froggy inhabitants to the wider world. Venture further into the valley, conquer peaks, and unravel mysteries, end quote. So Valley Peaks is set in a place called Valley Peaks. That's where we get the name. And you play as a frog in the first-person perspective. Your employer wants you to climb all the mountains in Valley Peaks so that you can install radio beacons at the top. And I think there are 11 mountains. So that becomes your ultimate goal. And your dad taught you how to climb from a very young age and worked as a climber himself, but he's gone missing while on the job. And so you're sort of following in his footsteps. You're also trying to find out like where he went. So you set off on an adventure. And when you arrive in Valley Peaks, you do a short tutorial section where you learn the basics of climbing. And this is where you find out you have to use your 2 arms to grab onto rocks. You can freely hang from a rock while you adjust your point of view to see the next rock, and then you can jump and grab onto the next one. And there are also obstacles like spikes that will repel you away from the mountainside if you touch them. As you go through Valley Peaks, there are dozens of frogs you can talk to. And early on, there's this frog named Tony, who welcomes you into a group called the Climbing Club. And the Climbing Club offers you all kinds of gadgets and upgrades for those gadgets. And these gadgets assist you with traversal and climbing. So on each of the 11 mountains and valley peaks, you're going to find easy, medium, and hard routes to get to the summit. So each of the 11 mountains actually has 3 routes. So you've got 33 different climbing paths, and you need to use all these gadgets to sort of assist your way up to the top. And every time you successfully take a route to the top of a mountain for the first time, you get a stamp on a card. And every 3 stamps you get nets you an upgrade from the climbing club. So very often in this game, you're going back to the climbing club and getting something new. Maybe it's a brand new gadget. Maybe it's a drastic upgrade to a gadget you already have. And you get gadgets like a stopwatch that will slow down time temporarily. You get a drone that lets you survey the mountain above you so you can kind of like get a sense of what you're about to run into. You get a glider for going long distances. You even get a jetpack eventually. There are tons of these things, and all of them require fuel, which recharges on its own when you're on the ground. But if you get high enough on a climb, there's this frosty air that will prevent the refueling of your gadgets. So you can't just use them willy-nilly. You have to ration the fuel.
What's another game where getting really high and really cold
Celeste?
inhibited us? A short hike?
Oh, a short hike? Yes. Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yes. So you can only use them so much. And you also find scrap and mushrooms that can be traded for upgrades, or they could be used to repair structures, or maybe they can give you extra stamps on your cards. The frogs around Valley Peaks will offer you quests, sometimes for collecting things or delivering items to other frogs. And you can collect gotcha toys for doing various tasks that you can then attach to your wristwatch as a tiny cosmetic.
Ooh, that's cute.
I think there are dozens of these things. And so when you start climbing with your selected gotcha, you'll see your little like prize that you've earned anytime you're on a route. You can find Polaroids that tell you tidbits of story from you and your father's past. There's a journal with multiple pages for your map and objectives, collectibles, and more. And your goal, again, is to just climb all the mountains, install those signals at the summits, and find out what happened to your frog dad. This game feels like a mixture between a short hike as well as getting over it with Bennett Foddy, because you are sometimes failing and just trying to climb up the same route over and over and over again. And then also Sludge Life for being in the first person perspective and sort of having this world that's just immediately open. You can just go anywhere in Valley Peaks as soon as you complete the tutorial. You can basically go anywhere in this place. And it is an expansive place. This place is big, as you can probably see in the
got
trailer.
11 mountains, man.
Yes. Yes, and there's distance between all of them.
Yeah.
You know, they can't just be all next to each other. So this place is big. Here's what I liked about Valley Peaks. I had played the demo previously, and I loved it. And I'm happy to say that the final game was worth the wait and fulfills the promise of what I played last year. The world is simply cozy and warm. There are autumnal colors that I think you would really love as someone who loves autumn.
Already do love it.
This feels quintessentially like a late September or early October game. Mm-hmm. It's got a gentle, approachable look. The frogs are really lovely to run into as well. You can be on a difficult climb, and they will provide this nice moment of respite during a challenge. I was sometimes spending 10, 15 minutes making a difficult climb. And then I round a corner. I finally make enough progress that I get to a new part of the mountain. And here's this frog. And it talks to me. It has something really charming to say to me. And the story is really simple, but it slowly stirred my emotions over time through this father-child relationship that's told. So just what this game is personality-wise is something that I adore. The climbing is really satisfying because you have this power to your jump that doesn't feel chaotic and out of control. You feel like you can jump really far, but you also don't feel like, you know, if I jump this far,
like control it right as I'm going.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about that as much because once you're pretty much aiming at your next spot, you know how your jump will perform.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like you can just jump really well in this game. And that makes sense because you're a frog. A helpful reticle is there too to help you know not only where you'll jump, but it changes to show whether you're within jumping distance of a grabbable object. So it's not just a reticle that's always in the center of your screen. It stays there, but when you point at something that you think might be within range, it will change to tell you, yes, this is going to be within range once you jump.
That is helpful.
It's so great in a game that is honestly like really challenging. And that's what I found kind of surprising about this game is that this game does get really hard. In addition to the easy, medium, and hard routes, each mountain has an overall star rating.
Right.
From 1 to 5. And they have hard routes on a 4 and 5-star mountain. That's some of the hardest content in the game. And that's where I was retrying over and over and over. But the game is giving you these things like the gadgets and the reticle that changes to help you out. So it feels like I have tools in this game to do really well. Like this game wants me to do well. I love that you can hold on to many of the ledges as long as you need to, and that there are sometimes what feel like mini checkpoints that protect you from some falls. Because not every mountain is just a wall that you climb up. The walls spiral. There are different like levels of ridges within the mountains. Sometimes you'll get to a mini checkpoint where like even if you fall from a certain segment of the mountain, you'll land on a ledge and then you can kind of try that section again. You don't fall all the way back down to the ground a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate that it's not that punishing. Each mountain also feels really different, and reaching a summit is a super good feeling. The climbing is not always easy, so I had to put this game down a few times because I wasn't getting to the top, but I would come back the next day and I would conquer that mountain because I was kind of working on it in the back of my mind. Also, the feeling of falling in this game feels so real, and it's a combination of the way the camera shakes and the way the sound design kicks in, the way the wind is rushing past your ears as you're falling. It is so convincing that I would sometimes feel this feeling of butterflies in my stomach as I'm falling
you were
off
like,
of. Yeah, because it is first person. And so I feel like it puts you into, the gaze of someone who is climbing up so well. And so that feeling of height feels extraordinary in this game. And then I love, love, love the music by, the artist is called Love from Tom, and Elizide, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but the music in Valley Peaks is so calming and peaceful and rejuvenating. It is exactly the soundtrack you want to help calm your nerves while you're making a difficult climb upward. And I've actually listened to this soundtrack a ton in my car as I drive around. It is music I can listen to in any mood. It relieves my stress. I simply think that this is one of the best soundtracks of any game I've played for the show. It's super good.
High praise.
Super high praise for the music in Valley Peaks. I do have dislikes with this game. I think this game does not explain the concepts of scrap and mushrooms clearly. These are the two like main collectibles that you pick up. So for the first like hour, I was sometimes picking up scrap and mushrooms, not really sure why I was picking them up. And then I realized, these are currency that I need to use to like buy some pretty significant things. And I must have missed the spot in the game that tells me like what the deal is with them, if there was a spot. Another thing that gave me difficulty is that there are some obstacles like spikes that look at your body's position on the mountain. And sometimes that's hard to judge because it's a first-person game. So as a climber in a first-person game, I definitely know where my eyeballs are. I know where my head is and like my shoulders and definitely my arms. Those are the things that I'm seeing. But sometimes it feels like my legs or my feet or my torso would make contact with a spike jutting out from a wall, and I would get propelled away. And there's just not always a good way to know what that boundary is.
So I know exactly what you're feeling because this is exactly what I was talking about when I was talking about maybe my butt's too big in Operation Tango.
Oh, yes.
And so when I was hitting those lasers,
yes.
it's the same principle at work there.
You got the big cake.
Yeah.
Tripping those lasers. And here it's just that I don't know where much of the lower part of my body, like the lower 3/4 of my body are. And so I think that's just a natural thing that will come with a first-person game. There are also some gadgets that aren't very appealing. And I actually think this game gives you too many gadgets. You get, gosh, is it like 9 gadgets, 10 gadgets? You get a lot of gadgets, and they just don't always offer the same amount of value. So there are some gadgets I didn't even touch because I didn't see the use case for them. But overall, Valley Peaks is so much more than meets the eye for me. It is a combination of coziness and challenging gameplay. I didn't expect this game to be as challenging when I started playing it. So this game made me feel really good with my ability to climb. I did finish it. It has one of my favorite soundtracks of all games we've played. It perfectly captures what I love about how games can make us feel by showing us a world we can fall in love with through visuals and sound. But beyond that, it offers a challenge that gives me so much joy to overcome. So that's why I want to rate this game a 9.5 out of 10.
Heckers, that's really high.
Yes, I loved Valley Peaks very much, and I want you to play it. I don't know if playing it, actually, there were several times where I thought, I don't think this is a DiscoCola game.
Yeah.
But I kind of want you to at least try an easier climb and just see what you think.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly how I'll feel about it. I think at the end of it, I would love looking at it more than I would love playing it.
Yeah.
But generally, first person has not been my preferred gameplay experience.
Yeah. I think you would reach a point in this game where you would probably get a little frustrated. But I think there's stuff to appreciate here for like almost anyone. Like you would appreciate the music and the visuals, like you said.
Yeah.
And I just think it's like a really great package. Also, it's playable on PC, which is the version I played, and Switch.
Cool. Looking at the trailer, apart from just the whole first person experience, the only thing that stands out as being like especially daunting, just apart from what might be difficult climbs, is like getting from mountain to mountain. There's a lot of space in between. I know that you're a frog, and I see some like launch pads, and I see like glider. Like, I guess, how quickly do you gain access to quick traversal? Like, is traversing from mountain to mountain a bit of a chore?
This is another thing that I was concerned about before I started, and I'm happy to report that those gadgets you get really help you not only with traversing the mountainsides, but also just the ground below. There's one that lets you sprint super fast, like you are running fast, like faster than you would expect.
Okay. Well, on the other side of that, if you're trying to mostly beeline from mountain to mountain, is there a lot to miss? Like, are these empty spaces between mountains filled with frogs that you could or should talk to?
There are frogs all over the place. There are dozens of these frogs, and they offer quests. And I think it is very easy to miss things. If you're a completionist, this is another big reason why I don't think you would gel with this game, is because it is a lot of work to do everything in this game. Tons of quests, tons of collectibles. I didn't even mention there are like juice boxes that are hidden places. And I would run through the same general area multiple times. And as I'm running through like the 4th or 5th time, I would realize, oh, there's a spot to repair to get more frost resistance. I'd better spend some scrap to do that. How did I miss that before? And then I'd see a treasure chest and I'd go, oh, how did I miss that? Every time I'm running through one of these areas for the 5th, 6th time, I'm finding new stuff.
Something new.
So there's a lot of detail to this world. It's not just this open field with not a lot going on. So I do compliment it for that, that there's a lot to stumble across. But that also means that it's hard to check off everything that there is to do in the game.
And that's sort of like, even though a short hike does it on a much smaller scale, it does seem like every time I'm getting up to the top of the mountain and then flying all the way back down, I'm like, I didn't even see that. There's a treasure chest up there or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's a big reason why I haven't completed a short hike yet, because there's just like that kind of a
I would
design.
I would say it's an even more almost overwhelming feeling in Valley Peaks than a short hike. A short hike compared to this, super manageable for 100%. If you're talking about doing every single thing in the game, Valley Peaks would be multiple times more overwhelming for you, I think.
Okay. I think then if I was hanging out at your house and you were like,
hey, can I
do you
show
want
you
to play
this?
Valley Peaks for a minute? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll play Valley Peaks for a minute, but I
Okay.
don't know if I would make an effort to play through the whole game myself.
Okay, yeah.
Myself.
Well,
it does look like a great game, though.
Yeah, I think I'd want you to do the tutorial and then do one climb in the proper Valley Peaks area. And I think that would be the taste tests. That would be perfect.
Yeah. Cool.
Those are our secret games, Lunark and Valley Peaks. Let's move on to our interview with Noah Lone, aka SomeHumbleOnion, this episode's special guests. Today we have a guest joining over Zoom, a dev who made a game about a mushroom, with platforming so great that it got an update. Around the world he is known for making games on his own that have the coziest tone. Welcome, Noah Lone. How's it going?
Amazing intro. That was absolutely awesome. It's going good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yes, we're so stoked that you're here. I've been looking forward to playing Smushy for a long time. I haven't had the chance yet. I'm waiting on my physical, which should be here any day now. And
very nice.
And I know that Bopo really loved that game and really just sold me on it when we reviewed it back in season 4,
I think. Yeah. Yeah, and I think I just saw a post from you that the physicals started shipping recently.
Yes, they did. I think mine's supposed to be getting here in a couple days. I'm really hoping, fingers crossed, because I'm about to be traveling to Japan in about a week. So I would just be like devastated if they came in the mail and I wasn't there to like. I just want to like hold it so badly. I can't even describe to you guys. I'm like so anxiously waiting.
Oh, I bet that's so special the moment you get to just like hold this thing that's never existed before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like it was just a total dream come true to even have those physicals. And oddly enough, I just found out someone threw it in my Discord. They saw that someone managed to get a copy of it before I even did.
What?
And the first thing they did was they sold it on eBay for like $80 and it sold immediately. It was one of the collector edition versions, so you had to be like a special like member of Super Rare Games to get it. And I was like, "Oh my god, someone got the copy before I did." No.
I mean, I feel bad for you, but also like you have to take that as a compliment too if it sold that quickly.
That's true.
I'm a big collector of physical media. It's why I kind of held off on Smushy for a little bit because I was like, first off, it was because I didn't have the time, but also I was like, this might get a physical, and then it did, and I was like, okay, perfect. And then we found out we were having you as a guest. I'm like, oh, I can't wait. So I did try. I was going to try to play it before the recording, but anyways, I've always been curious. I've heard the side of the story of like how physicals work from the company side. Like I've heard limited run games talk about stuff a lot, but I want to know from the developer side, like what is that like to get your game done in a physical version? Like how does that happen?
That's a good question. You know, I think it's a lot of different ways it can happen. You can definitely approach companies like Super Rare Games, Limited Run, certain publishers do it. For me, it was kind of a funny story. Before I signed with my publisher, Moon Eye Studios, Super Rare Games was also interested in signing as well. I was kind of having to choose between either of them, and I really wanted to work with both of them, both super great companies. I made the decision to sign with Moon Eye Studios, but Super Rare Games was just super cool. They were like, look, no worries at all. If you ever want to work on a physical, you know, that's our thing. That's what we do primarily. We publish games kind of on the side, but really we're big on making physicals. That's their whole company. If you ever want to make a physical for Smushy, if the game really, you know, sells well, make sure you hit us back up. And I actually visited some family in London a couple of months after that, where they're based. The Super Rare Games headquarters is based there. I went there. I got to meet George, the founder, and everything. I got to meet the whole team. It was really cool. They actually gave me a physical copy of A Short Hike before it got even released, because they knew.
So cool.
Yeah, they knew I was a big fan. They knew that Smushy was, you know, heavily inspired by Short Hike. I think I actually got that physical before the short hike dev did. So now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of the same thing that's
It's
happening
karma.
to me now.
It's karma, really. It
It's
all
karma,
balances
yeah.
out. Yeah.
It was cool. I got to go down there and see where they like boxed everything up, and they were like, a short hike was the next one on their list, and he was just like, I got a surprise for you, and George handed me the copy, and I was like, whoa. So we basically have been staying in touch. We got to hang out. I got to have lunch with them, and just a super cool company. Very passionate about indie games. Again, like no hard feelings that I didn't sign with them or anything. They wanted to still work with me, so it was a really easy transition, kind of getting that physical release for me because I kind of already had a connection with Super Rare Games at that point. And it was really just like, hey, you know, a little while later after the game came out, I was like, guys, I really want to do a physical release. The game sold quite well. I think we could manage to pull this off. I've got a content update coming. Let me get that done. They were like, yeah, finish that. And then we will get a cartridge going. We'll go through that whole process and we can have all the fun stuff going. You can start commissioning an artist. It took a while. You know, we worked on it for quite a long time. Super happy with how it turned out though. And it's just so surreal to like finally see it coming in and hearing a lot of like people in my Discord server counting the days down, waiting for their emails to come in to say it's been shipping. And it's just like, oh man, it's just so cool. And surprisingly, it's just been so smooth. Again, I think most devs, you kind of have to like reach out to these companies and you have to pitch your idea. And I think mainly what they look for is they want to know how many copies the game has sold, so that way they can figure out how many, you know, what kind of physical audience is out there. Because apparently the market's kind of gone down a little bit, but now it might be trending back upwards. I hope it continues to trend upwards because I think collecting physical copies of games and just like you were saying, Disco. I mean, honestly, I'm the same way. I love collecting just like old school merch kind of stuff, and I don't know, physicals are just so cool. I'm really happy I got to do it. I'm sorry, I feel like I kind of went off on a tangent there a little
No,
bit.
that's
I hope I
cool.
answered the question.
What I love about that story is just maintaining that relationship with Super Rare, and you know, even though it didn't work out with them to be your publisher, knowing people matters, and you never know when those relationships will come back.
And it's good to hear as someone who like there are certain, you know, physical print companies where I look at them, I'm like, you're doing physical prints, yes, but you don't seem super passionate about it because you're doing the safe bets. You're not always doing like the cool indies. And so it's good to hear that Super Rare is on that side because they've printed a lot of my favorites that maybe aren't like blockbusters. Like they did Super Crush KO, which is a game that I love, and a lot of people, you know, have gotten turned on to it because of us. But I'm happy to hear that they care about it. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. I also
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I like the idea of somewhere in the world, Adam Robinson not getting his copy of a short hike. He's like, damn it, who took my copy?
Yeah.
Love that.
If he's ever listening to this, Adam, I am so sorry.
Yeah,
I truly apologize. I love you, man. Please stay awesome. Please making games. He's such a cool dev.
And let's just take a step back and talk about what got you into game development and what eventually led you to creating Smushy Come Home.
Yeah, it's another interesting story, honestly, because game development's just one of those things where I grew up my whole life wanting to give it a try, but it just seemed like a astronomical achievement to make a game on your own, and it was just so complicated. So I kind of put that whole dream behind me a long time ago, and as I kind of got older and I was going through college and I was studying computer science, learning how to program, being absolutely terrible at it, had this opportunity to make a little game for a school project, actually, in my final year of college, my final semester of college, right when COVID hit. Yeah, it was 2020 of spring, so we were on spring break, and we basically never came back. And the teacher was kind of just super flustered, and she was like, "Okay, we need to make a final project. I don't know what's going on." It was a web programming class, and she was like, "Just make anything for your final, just as long as it uses JavaScript." I was like, "Okay, cool. Let me try something out. Let me try something fun here, something I actually really want to do. I'm gonna try to make a game using JavaScript." And yeah, just totally fell in love with it. I had just never ever in my life, truly, I had never been ambitious about anything, and I just never really worked hard on things, honestly. I think because I just couldn't find that passion. And with this little game project, it was just a little school project. You didn't have to work on it super hard, but I was over here spending all day and night on it just because I wanted to.
Hmm.
It was just so much fun, drawing the characters, putting them into a level, programming it, playing it out, designing the levels. Like, I really, really love doing every single thing. I had like 2 team members in my group, and I just literally didn't let them do a single thing. Just nothing at all. And every now and then they would kind of hit me up and be like, "Hey, do you need any help?" And I'm like, "No, no, it's cool. I got it. Don't worry." And I don't think they mind. They basically got a free A. But yeah, that was really just like my introduction to game dev and how I really got into it. Since, obviously I'm a big gamer in general. I love playing video games. I've played my whole life, and I love movies. I love music. I really just love all sorts of creative things, and video games are just like a combination of all that. And so it was just like the perfect medium. And seeing that it was actually doable, here I was making this little class project. It was like a little 2D platformer game. Seeing how doable it was with today's technology and free resources we have, I was like, hang on, there might be something here. Maybe I can actually give this a try. I graduated college like right after that project, and I was offered a full-time job surprisingly at my internship, and I kind of just turned it down, and I was like, I'm sorry, I've got this thing I really want to give a try, and I just went full force into it.
So lockdown started at the beginning of the pandemic, and you were just going into like learning mode, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. Honestly, the first 6 months of me giving this game dev thing a try, I failed miserably. I like got really serious on this overly ambitious project. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I'm going to quit my job. I had like $10,000 saved up from college, and I was like, I'm going to live off this and make this big game. And it's going to be this like big open world thing. I was very, very inspired by Eric Baroni, who made Stardew Valley, as I'm sure you know. And
Yep.
yeah, I was like, he made a game in 4 years. I can do it too. And I just absolutely crashed and burned, both mentally and physically, from just overworking myself to death. So thankfully, I didn't give up from that failure. You really just gotta like choose to learn from those failures. And I took a step back and started working on a game that was a bit smaller, way more closer to me, who I am, my vision, and yeah, that became Smushy, basically.
Wow. It's interesting hearing you talk about the two sides of the spectrum. Your first project that kind of kicked off this interest being such a small idea, which was probably the only thing that was possible when you were trying to finish up your last semester. And then those ideas ballooning into like a really ambitious project, and then sort of finding that middle ground that became Smushy. The measure of you as a developer is how you react to those challenges for sure. And you decided to just get back up and keep at it. And hats off to you for going at it during the pandemic when a lot of people were unsure what to do with their lives. Like, you figured out a direction for your life. I played 1,000 hours of Animal Crossing. That's what I did during the pandemic.
I did that also, but I had a kid, so that was most of what I was working on.
Yeah, everybody was working on something else.
Animal Crossing's awesome, though. I think my wife did the exact same thing.
Yeah, it was a good bonding activity with me and my wife. We played a lot, like every day together,
and all of our friends. Yeah, I think one of our friends just bought a Switch to play Animal Crossing. Basically,
that was my wife. Yeah, that was my wife. She had never bought her own game console until
that was my wife too. Yep, right there.
So all of that culminated in, you got a publisher in Moon Eye Studios. You got like physical merch here, like Bopo, who doesn't buy a lot of physical games or anything.
Don't.
He's got Smushy, so that says something, I think. But I want to hear specifically about partnering up with Moon Eye Studios.
Yeah. They're really, really awesome company. Very small. It's like 5-6 people working there.
Oh, wow.
And one thing I really loved about them was that they were developers first and then business people second. They created this game, Lost Ember, was a big success. They made a bunch of money off it, and they were like, "Hey, we're going to use this money to help other indies." And so that was just like a really, really cool thing to me. So funny enough, they approached me on Twitter. A couple of publishers had approached me at this point, and I won't give any names, obviously, due to like NDAs and stuff. But let's just say, like, pretty much all those publishers were very sketchy, very sketchy deals, very sketchy offers. They weren't offering much. They were taking a lot. So I was like, all right, I got to figure out how to self-publish this thing. You know, maybe the console port will just be a dream for now. That's the only reason why I really need a publisher anyways. I'll just upload it on Steam. Moon Eye reached out to me. I had a really nice meeting with them, and then I ghosted them for like 5 months. Yeah, it was pretty bad. I don't know, like, despite the meeting going really well, I was like, you know what? I don't need a publisher. I'm gonna do it on my own. And yeah, I'm really glad I changed my mind on that. And I'm really glad that they were just like totally open when I came back. They were like, "Hey, we've been waiting to hear from you." I was like, "Here I am, 5 months later. What were those numbers again you guys were talking about?" I had like pretty much lost like everything that I had wrote down from our first meeting, and they were just super, super cool. And it was at that time that Super Rare Games had reached out to me as well, and ultimately I went with Moon Eye. And yeah, they were just a super, super awesome small team that were very experienced. And another nice thing about them was they weren't going to try and fund the game and dump $200,000 into funding the game, and then they were gonna have to recoup all that, you know. And I made that very clear with them. I was like, look, I don't want a salary. I don't want you to pay me or anything. I just need you to pay the bare minimum, get the game on the Switch, maybe help pay my musicians since I was starting to run out of funds for myself, living off of those $10,000 still. And yeah, they were super, super open with it. They were really helpful. They helped get the game on the Switch, no problem. The co-founder of Moon Eye was like the lead dev, and he did like all the porting. We worked very closely together, and yeah, just really, really helped me get into a lot of cool things. Got to go to PAX and meet them, which was really cool because they're based in Germany. So they flew down. We got to go to PAX East. They got me into Day of the Devs in San Francisco, a game convention that I'll never forget. I got to meet tons of friends like Billy, developer of Animal Well, and
That's awesome.
Madison, his wife, and I got to meet Aggro Crab.
Oh, amazing.
Dope.
Wow.
All kinds of cool devs and people. We were all just chatting and hanging out by the San Francisco beaches and just talking game dev all day and night. And it was absolutely, and I would have never been able to do these things without Moon Eye. So I'm not trying to like gas them up here too much, but you know, just speaking from the heart, honestly, like they really did help make this dream come true and get the game on the Switch, which was absolutely massive and beneficial to its success. And yeah, just crazy what happens when you just post your work out there online. You know, I never did any publisher pitching, none of that. They just saw my posts and they decided to reach out, and here I am. Life
Wow.
changed basically.
Yeah, that's how I knew about Smushy pre-release too. I was just keeping an eye on, all the new posts, all the new GIFs or whatever that would be posted online. That's how I find out about a lot of games I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. One post can make
Same
a huge
here.
difference. And yeah, they just sound like the perfect fit for you. That's so cool to hear about. So I got to play the game last year and I reviewed it on the podcast, had a blast with it. And one thing that I didn't expect in Smushy Come Home is actually how educational it is. You kind of learn a little bit about mycology. There's actually a mycology journal in there. For you, what did it mean to add a little bit of education into your game?
Well, it was originally, the game being all mushroom themed and nature themed and all. I was really just looking for an excuse to make some sort of 3D, it has like the 3D viewer in there.
Yeah.
A 3D like kind of encyclopedia in my game, because I just like love that kind of stuff in games. And I was specifically inspired by Pikmin 2. Pikmin 2. Have you guys played it?
I played it earlier this year.
I haven't played the second one
Okay.
yet,
Yeah, I
but
played it earlier this
I've
year.
played a lot of games with that in it. Like the Trashopedia in Donut County is a good
Yes.
example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. So for me, it was the Piccolopedia in Pikmin 2.
Nice.
And as a kid, I would just spend hours and hours reading the notes, even though it was all fake science. Just reading the notes and like messing around in the Piccolopedia and like playing with the camera. And I just really, really wanted something like that because I'm a huge, massive Pikmin fan, my favorite game of all time. And Smushy's pretty inspired by it as well. So I was like, let me try to like figure out some sort of way. I'm using real plants and stuff in all of my game. I would go out on walks pretty much every day, go out on jogs, and I would grab my camera and I would take pictures of plants around my neighborhood, and I would then go home and model them and put them into the game. So I was like, well, I'm using real plants, I'm using real objects. This game takes place on Earth. Maybe I could put some real mushrooms in there. And mushrooms are fascinating, but not a lot of people really know a lot about them. And they're just a really interesting species overall. So what if I kind of, add some educational content in there? And honestly, just one thing led to another. I made the first mock-up for the mycology journal and fell in love with the idea. And it's one of those features where, it's totally optional. And I think quite a lot of people do miss it. They don't pay attention to it. They see a little notification pop up, and not a lot of people are super interested in reading all that text and stuff. But the ones that did, I've like had people tell me about it, and they're just like, that was just such a cool part of the game and just such a special thing to be able to learn real facts. And I was very surprised to see that it was real mushrooms and real facts. And so I'm really glad that I put that feature in the game, despite it taking a tremendous amount of time, because I'd have to do all the research and fact check everything, and not to mention the development of making that feature was pretty heavy. But yeah, it felt really cool to be able to put some actual educational value into the game, and people could learn something from it. And it's just like a nice little bonus. It's like a cherry on top.
Yeah, it's definitely something you don't have to do, but it adds character and personality to the stuff you can dig around in with the game. And I also like how it gives you an opportunity to have Smushy throw in some comments too. Smushy is observing all these mushrooms and is also saying like, wait, I'm a mushroom. And so it gets like a little existential for just a moment. So that was a nice like little moment of humor as well.
Definitely.
So this next question up here resulted in one of my favorite moments in all of Underplayed history, to be honest. In Smushy Come Home, you have various levels of pixelation in the menu, and one I seem to recall is called "Yo, I can't see."
Yeah,
is that right?
Right.
Yeah,
because it's so pixelated.
yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
How do you go about actually doing that in your game? Because I love those kind of like, it's already sort of not quite low poly, but kind of low poly, but then you like add that extra layer of classical style graphics. Like, how do you go about doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much inspired by how A Short Hike had done it. And I loved how, I always loved like that pixelated look in 3D games. I remember back in the day, for like I would like be replaying newer games on my PC, and sometimes I would try to shrink the resolution specifically because I wanted to see a little bit of that pixelated look. I don't know, it's super weird. I don't know why I love it so much, but yeah, it's just one of those things where Unity makes it really easy. From a technical standpoint, it's really not too difficult to pull off. The camera is basically pointing, seeing what the player sees. I shoot that over to what's called a render texture, which is like a UI image. I scale it down so it's super tiny, the resolution's super small, and then I blow it back up. And so it's basically like you're looking at a small resolution that's just been blown up for you so that it matches your screen size fully. So it's just a little, like a little camera trick that you can do, and I'm noticing a lot more games do it now just because it's like a fun aesthetic to have. And it was actually the game's initial art style, and then it was Mooneye who actually pointed it out. They were like, hey, maybe you should stop using that as like the main look for the game because the game actually looks really great without it. We personally like it a little more without the pixelation look. And at first I was like, what? No, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Pixelation's awesome. And the more I started to actually play the game without the pixelation, the more I actually loved it without the pixelation, funny enough. But I still love to use it every now and then. And I left it in there for, people like me who enjoy using that mode. And then the Yo, I Can't See was just like a funny goof that I made one day for a TikTok. And I was like, you know what? This is the beauty of being an indie dev and making your own game. I'm just gonna leave this in there.
You just
I don't
do
have
it.
anyone that can.
Yeah.
It's your game. Do it.
Exactly. No one can tell me no. If someone wants to play the game in that mode and have a massive headache afterwards, go ahead.
They know how to change it back if they want to. Yeah, I
Yep.
played a little bit on the most pixelated setting, just more as like a novelty little experience. And then
hmm
I think I played most of the game on the crispest mode, but then I would play around and try some of the more pixelated ones as I went. So I was kind of all over as I played.
That's awesome.
I'd just be like, you know what? For the next hour, let's play a little bit more pixelated. Let's go.
Yeah, there you go.
We assume Smushy is maybe your favorite character. You know, Smushy is close to your heart, right?
Mhm.
But besides Smushy, do you have a favorite character in Smushy Come Home?
Absolutely. Second favorite, obviously Smushy, very dear to my heart, like you said. But a close second is Chungi.
Uh,
Chungi is the little purple mushroom guy who you find in the last level of the main storyline. It's always so hard. It's always so weird when I say last level because there's the content update now, which has
right,
a new last level.
right. The third
So
area.
third area. There you
Yeah.
go. You have to basically rescue him. He's in a cave and he's just super over dramatic, and I don't even know what the right word is, like bodacious maybe. He's just extreme and hilarious and goofy, and he was one of the first characters that I made in the game way back in the day.
Mm.
And he had a totally different quest line, and he was like a totally different size too. He was actually like a massive character at first. Didn't work out. I cut the whole quest line, but I didn't want to get rid of him. So I brought him back into that quest line that's now in the game, and for some reason, I shrunk him down one day, and I was like, he actually looks really cute and funny when he's tinier than Smushy, rather than being bigger than him. So definitely my second favorite character. We've got tons of emojis of Chungi in my Discord server. I love that like the community loves him too, and I'm hoping one day I could do a plushie of Chungi.
Oh,
I think that'd be hilarious.
that'd be so cool. Well, you've got
hmm
momentum with doing the 2 makeshift campaigns. I hope that can happen.
Yeah, hopefully.
So you created a lot of the game by yourself, but you had Fail Positive responsible for the soundtrack. So what's that process like to collaborate with a game composer when you're doing pretty much everything on your own? You know, you talked about your college project where you're like, you know what, I got it. Stay
Yeah.
back a little bit, but so what's that like to work with someone on the music?
Like I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy doing everything on my own. With my first overly ambitious game that I worked on that I quit my job for, I was trying to write the music for that, and I am not really much of a musician. I'm trying to be, but it's tough. It's something that I should have learned much earlier in my life, honestly. So I kind of realized that going into Smushy, I was like, okay, the one thing I cannot do is the music. I'm going to have to give up creative control on that and just trust the person that I choose. I'm gonna have to really choose correctly. With Fail Positive, I think it was like the first track he sent me was for the spring level. I already knew he was gonna be a good choice from the mock-ups he had sent me and all that. But with that first level song that he sent me, I was like, man, this is it. Like this guy knows what he's doing. And I don't have to worry at all. All I gotta do is just send him mock-ups and I know he's gonna write the perfect song for whatever level I need. And it was just super seamless. And he's just such an awesome dude who lives an hour away from me, which was a super crazy
Oh,
coincidence.
yeah, that helps a lot, I'm
That
sure.
does,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we had no idea. And after I had signed him on, I was like, hey man, you're the one, you're the musician. And we were chatting a little bit on Discord one day, and he was like, "Hey, by the way, where do you live?" And I was like, "Oh, I live right here over here." And he's like, "Are you kidding me? I live right over here." And I was like, "We've got to hang out."
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Wow.
and now we're good friends, and I go and see him every now and then, and he was just hanging out with me at DreamHack this weekend and helping me run the booth and all that, this convention I went to. But yeah, it was very seamless. He really just took care of everything with the music. I still handled most of the sound design, but he would do a couple little jingles here and there, like when you get an item and it plays a sound, or when you bump into a mushroom and you get a new journal entry. He made those cool little sounds, and it's really cool to see that Smushy has kind of been like the biggest game that he's worked on now too. So it's
Mm.
Ooh, yeah.
it's we really just kind of both helped each other out
Yeah,
with
lifted
that.
each other up. That's awesome.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
I want to follow up. I'm sure every like collaboration is different, but I always have to assume that the composer has to play a good amount of the game itself to sort of like get the vibe, or maybe even try to
Mhm.
build in some sort of like ability to create dynamic music. Is that the case here? Like, did he have to play just like hours and hours and hours of Smushy while it was still in development?
Honestly, not really. In fact, there were levels that he would write for, I think the fall level and even the third level with the capybaras. He barely played them. I would basically just send him screenshots and he would just start writing and he would make them fast too. It'd be like 2 hours and he would send me like the first draft and I'd be like, whoa. And then 30 minutes later, he'd be like, here's the pan flutes. Here's the strings in there now. And I'd be like, dude, slow down. I'm like, you're writing this thing faster than I can plug it into the game. And yeah, he's been a musician. He grew up in a family of musicians and stuff like that. So I think he's just really, really got that talent. I would send him builds. I'd be like, hey, run around the level, play it, get a vibe. And he would hardly have to do that. He really just needed screenshots and he wanted to hear what I was looking for, was the vibe that I was looking for. And he would send me all the instrument tracks separately since the game has that dynamic soundtrack and all. And I would just take care of it from there.
Cool. Well, before we move on from music, we should probably do our diligence and shout out Fail Positive. You can find them on Twitter at least, and I see that they have a lot of the albums on Spotify. You can find them in a number of places, and if there's more, feel free to share, Noah.
Yeah, definitely check out GarageBand as well, Fail Positive, support the music there. Spotify, like you mentioned. We've got vinyls in the works.
Hackers.
Keep an eye out for that.
Merch.
Yep, some vinyls in the works. And yeah, Fail Positive on all social medias. Definitely go give it a follow.
All right. So as we sit down, it is late 2024. Your game came out sort of was it the summer of 2023?
Yeah.
So we're now over a year since the release of Smushy Come Home. How does it feel to be at this point? We sometimes hear about devs who release games and, what it feels like. It's like this mixture of excitement and anxiety and maybe 10 other emotions when a game is coming out. But now that you are over a year since release, what does it feel like to be in this moment?
It is incredibly bizarre, to be honest. And it is it's honestly an emotion that I try to figure out almost every single day. Just to get a little personal, I'm at this very weird point in my life where I'm like, I've got this game that's come out. It's done way better than I ever imagined. It's completely changed my life and it's allowed me to keep doing this now. But what do I do now? And it's very confusing, I will say, but at the same time, it's amazing and beautiful and just very humbling. It's just so strange because a year ago when that game came out, I had just basically come off of 2 years of working the hardest I've ever worked in my life, and then immediately jumped into a content update. And not only that, but just the immense craziness of a game release, talking to all kinds of people, Discord servers blowing up, fan art coming in, trying to figure out how to do merch all of a sudden, figuring out what to do with this money. I got to start an LLC now. It was just a crazy year, craziest year of my life. And now it's just done a complete 180. And I'm kind of just taking a lot of look backs and just kind of seeing what worked with Smushy, trying to figure out my next project, trying to figure out what I want to do with Smushy because I love Smushy as a character. I love the game. I don't want to put it down, but I definitely don't want to make a sequel right now. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very bizarre time. It's crazy to think that the game came out over a year ago. It just does not make any sense to me because sometimes I find myself still sitting upstairs and at my dad's house working on that game at 12 o'clock at night. And I'm just like, how am I not still there right now? The game really came out. I'm not still working on the game. It came out. And we even did a content update for it. It's just super bizarre. Yeah, I'm honestly very curious to hear what it's like for other devs who are kind of in the same position. And there's really only a few that I talk to. And we all always have one very similar thing in common that I've noticed. They're always just yeah, we're kind of just in shock. We just don't really know what to do. Do you keep working on your game? Do you go jump to another thing? I mean, that's a very difficult question to ask. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's similar for authors, finishing a book. I'm sure it's similar for other artists and other creators. who work on something for so long. You worked on this for several years, and now it's just like you're
Yeah, but about 2 years, yeah.
Yeah, all of that is such an immense amount of experiences to hold on to personally. And now you're at this point where you're thinking about what to do next.
Yeah, like if you're a musician, you release the album and then you go on tour with the album and then you start writing the next album. But like
Yeah.
the closest thing that maybe a game dev probably does to going on tour is, I don't know, something like this maybe, and going to like cons and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very true, honestly. And it's interesting to see some devs out there that I really do envy, honestly, at times where they will release a game and they immediately start jumping into a new project and they're posting it online and they're like, yeah, back at it. And it's just
Wow.
like, and it looks awesome too. It looks just as cool as their previous game. And I'm like, how the heck are you guys not burnt out
They
on?
had to be working on it, previously, and now they're just sort of resuming where they left off.
Yeah, I think
gotta
that's
be part of
exactly it. Yeah, I'll tell my wife, I'm just like, I feel guilty sometimes, and I'm just like not really working on anything right now, now the content update came out, and she's like, you worked for like 2, 3 years. Take a chill pill.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, I don't know how to anymore.
Yeah, you're conditioned to working and working and working.
Yeah, exactly.
So you worked on the game for a couple of years, you released it, and then you went immediately into a content update called Heart of the Forest. How is this different than working on just the base game?
It was surprisingly very challenging. When I would make levels for Smushy's very level based. That's kind of how I centered a lot of the game design and things like that. So I thought it would just be like making another level. And I guess I underestimated how freaking difficult it is to make one level. It would take me months to make each level in Smushy and multiple iterations. And then to now add a new level on top of a finished game that has had a, ending with a bow tied around it, the game really came full circle. And now I was kind of breaking that and adding a new thing to go check out after you've beaten the game. And it's one of the reasons why it took a little bit longer. For one, I like working on that update was very difficult at times. I think I was just incredibly burnt out. I didn't take enough time off after the game came out and then
Mhm.
deciding to do a content update, but I didn't want to wait too long. So for one, I was not working on it, I think, as much as I could have for certain periods. And that's why it took a little while. But yeah, it was just challenging. It was just really challenging, trying to figure out new mechanics I can add into the level that wouldn't break the game. That was my number one fear was whatever I do, I cannot break everything behind the content update. The game needs to stay very, very solid. Thankfully, making a game polished is just so tricky, and it feels like sometimes you don't even know what you're doing, and you're just like, hold up, everything stop. It works. Ship it. Go. This is the build. That's the build. No one do anything.
Yeah, don't breathe
Don't
on
breathe,
it.
don't drop the couch,
Exactly. And then for me to go back and basically just break that and then add new content to it, it was definitely tricky, but in a lot of ways it was very similar to just work on a new level of Smushy. I had established a really nice workflow. I knew the game design perfectly at that point. It was just a matter of iterating on level design and writing and story, and I had a couple different stories in mind, and they all kind of involved this heart of the forest thing. You have to do something with it. So I kind of just stuck with that. And I think it was a pretty cool little storyline that was a little bonus for people that wanted to keep playing, because that was kind of one of the major criticisms the game got. Thankfully, it was all very, very positive. I'm just like super shocked that the game has a 99% positive score on Steam still. Like, just absolutely freaking, yeah, I don't know. But despite that, I still get, even in the positive reviews, every now and then I'll get someone who's just like, oh man, love the game. I hate that it ended. I wish there was more.
Yeah.
So reviews like that, reading reviews like that was actually really, really nice because it was a positive review still.
Yeah.
And that really like fueled me to just keep on going and keep making that content update. And I knew a lot of players were going to miss the update, like people who had already played the game. Only a very small amount of players will actually get to that point and get to try the update. But I was like, I want to give something for players to come back to, and also something that new players will have once they fully beat the game. So, like I said, it was pretty difficult to develop, but it kind of smoothed out at the end, and it was a pretty smooth transition.
Well, I'm a player who did revisit the game to play the entire content update the week it came out.
Awesome.
I actually streamed it on Twitch and had a great time with it.
Oh man.
I thought it was a perfect amount to add to the game, to jump back in, refamiliarize yourself, and go, oh yeah, this is like maybe the size of one of the chapters, maybe a little bit bigger from the base game. And it was just a great excuse to revisit that world. So thank you for making that available for free for owners of the game.
Yeah. Of course. Thank you for playing it. I
Yeah.
love hearing that. I don't hear much about the content update, to be honest. So it's always really, really nice to hear just what people thought of it, and that's perfect.
We've talked a little bit about all the collaborations you've done. We've talked about Makeship. I've got one of the Smushy plushies right here sitting on top of my microphone. And like Disco said, I never order this stuff, but I have one of these. I have number 508. And
oh man, that's awesome. You got one of the last ones, I think.
Were there like 600? How many were there?
I think we sold 500 something.
500
It was
something.
Like
Okay.
520. Yeah, so that's awesome.
Oh, I'm close to the end. Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I know you've got another Makeship campaign with the, is it the ink cap?
Drop? Yeah, ink cap. I just saw
there
that
you are.
online.
He's holding
Yep.
it. He's holding it up. So they're
Little
saying
ink cap here.
they're going to say hi to each other. Hello.
Hey.
But then also, you've done other cool things, like you were in Steam Next Fest in, I think it was February 2023. That's how I learned about Smushy Come Home. I played the demo
Really?
in Next Fest. Then you've got other things like your appearance in a Wholesome Games showcase or two. How do some of these things happen? I assume Moon Eye has a role. I assume it's a collaboration between you and Moon Eye and sort of like looking for these opportunities, maybe applying for some things. Maybe some things come to you. How do these things happen?
Yeah, it's really a combination of a lot of that. You know, for any devs out there listening, you don't need a publisher to do all these things. You know, you can definitely still do it on your own, but having a publisher does help. So, for example, I was in the very first thing I ever got Smushy in was called the Wholesome Snack. It was a bite-sized version of the Wholesome Games Direct, and I got into that just kind of on my own. Wholesome Games gave me a follow one day. They saw my game. They saw it was kind of growing a little bit on Twitter, and I just kind of reached out to them and I told them, hey, if you guys are doing any showcases, definitely let me know. But then when it came to the Wholesome Direct, where we announced Smushy, we did the shadow dropping on the Direct. Moon Eye organized all that. They made it all work out. That would have been really difficult to have pulled off on my own. And then things like the plushies, for example, that was basically all me. I reached out to Makeship. After the game came out and all that, Moon Eye had to start focusing on their other game as well that they were releasing, Farewell North. Shout out to Kyle Banks. Shout out to Farewell North. Amazing games. Definitely check those out. But yeah, they kind of had to start shifting focus to that a little more. And they were still there to support Smushy and help me with bug fixes and stuff like that. But I kind of just took the wheel on merch. And I was like, I really want to get a plushie going. I'm just going to contact Makeship for me. I hope you guys are cool with me just stepping in that role. And they were like, yeah, absolutely, go for it. So yeah, it's really just about reaching out. You know, reach out as much as you can. The worst you can get is a no. But I mean, if you don't ask, then you're not really going to get anything. So you really just have to kind of put yourself out there. And that's how I made things work with the Wholesome Snack. That's how I made things work with the plushies. I've had other manufacturers contact me. There's potential merch in the works for that now. I mean, you kind of just got to do a little bit of everything.
Here's stuff that I miss out on a lot just by the very nature of not having a smartphone. But Bopo will occasionally show me some of the Smushy TikToks, and I think they're really interesting, especially when you're like screwing around with a lot of values in the game. We want to know, like, how do you come up with those ideas for your social platforms? Because that's something that you do really well that isn't necessarily the same as other game devs on their social platforms.
Yeah, those videos have really, really taken off, especially on Instagram, which was really, really fun to see because they're just a lot of fun to make, honestly. Like they're just so goofy, and some of them are just happy accidents, like the one where I stretched Smushy out a bunch. That was just me kind of playing around with this Boing asset that I had that basically like makes the bones of the model kind of have a bounce effect to it. And I just like took the slider and dragged it all the way up, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is insane!" And I showed my wife, and I was like, "This is like almost scary. I got to make a video about it." So it's a lot of it's just happy accidents. But I mean, I also have like a Trello board open on my computer where I just write down ideas. Make Smushy gigantic, then run around the level, see what that looks like. Probably looks ridiculous. That'll be a great video. Stuff like that. And truth be told, I'm really kind of running out of ideas on those now, which is kind of why my posts have slowed down a little bit on there. But sometimes they just kind of come to me, and I'd be like, okay, you know what? Let me sit down. Let me make that real quick. I think that'll be funny. And if it goes viral, it goes viral. And if it doesn't, that's just a really, really funny video. I hope some people get a chuckle out of it like I did. And yeah, it's really just a typical brainstorming and just spontaneous ideas and messing around in the game.
I will admit that the first time I saw one of those, I got a little bit nervous. I was like, "Oh God, I hope he remembers to like change it back or like discard his save or
What was
whatever."
the original value?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a nightmare if I did not control Z one of those things. and
Oh no.
I had to like push an update or something, and that value was stuck because
Oh no.
yeah, I get comments like that every now and then. Most people are just like, "That's hilarious, make it a feature," and then every now and then I'll get a comment of someone going, "Is Smushy okay?
Yeah.
Don't do that."
When Smushy has a face and a name, people fall in love with characters with names and faces. And so when you do things to Smushy, these
Yeah.
questions happen.
Yep.
But it's a really cool way to continue to deliver entertainment about Smushy outside of the realm of the game. You're sort of building your brand as a creator too. You're sort of like showing some of your personality, some of your sense of humor. And I love that.
Yeah, definitely.
As a game developer, what's one tool or source of inspiration you rely on that some people might be surprised by?
That's a good question because I think a lot of people probably know and assume that one tool of inspiration is just playing video games. I think it's like one of the more obvious ones. But I think one of the less obvious ones that people probably don't know is looking at unfinished games. Every now and then I'll hop into itch.io and just play some random game jam games, small little unfinished projects. I didn't necessarily do that for Smushy, but this is something that I've been using to kind of get inspiration for prototypes and stuff like that. So just playing like unfinished games, unpolished games, looking at games that people are developing on Twitter, things you can't try, things that aren't done, but just they look great. And getting inspiration from that, I think it really, really does help trying things that are unpolished, things that aren't finished, things that are prototypes themselves, and see that it has potential and see that it wasn't taken far enough and piggyback off that. And I think that's a really, really good source of inspiration. Obviously, playing polished games too, because you get to see, hey, what works? Why does this work so well? But then also playing unfinished stuff and just messing around with little game jam games and things like that. So I think that's something that not enough people would give a try.
I think that's an incredible idea. I never would have thought of that, but yeah, that's really interesting. So last we've alluded to some of this already a little bit, but we want to ask what you're looking forward to next. If there's anything that we haven't already mentioned, I'd be interested in also where you come from gaming wise. Like we know you love Katana Zero, but what else do you love?
I think where I come from as far as a gamer, definitely grew up as a Nintendo kid, N64 and PlayStation 1, but GameCube is like my heart and soul. I love GameCube games.
Pikmin.
Obviously, yep, like I mentioned before, Pikmin 1 and 2, those are games that like I still have to this day. I still replay to this day. Just honestly, Pikmin like shaped a lot of ways in my life. I feel it's really crazy how a game can do that. Super Mario Sunshine, though, I mean, just Loved that game to death. Playing all the Sonic games on the GameCube, like it was just my favorite console. And oddly enough, I also got a big MMO thing going on as I grew up. I was a huge RuneScape guy. Loved playing RuneScape. I played WoW. I played like every single MMO that came out. MapleStory. I
Oh
just like,
yeah, I was a
yeah.
MapleStory kid.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
MapleStory was so much fun. I played the crap out of that. And MMOs are kind of like dead now, I feel, at least most of them. But I'm glad I got to like be in that era when it was the prime and everyone
Yeah.
was on there and you could making all sorts of friends and
There was definitely a wave for
Mhm.
like a good, I don't know what it was, a decade where it felt like it
yeah.
was the golden years. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Every server was packed, no matter what
Mhm.
MMO you were playing. It was just so much fun. But yeah, I guess that's kind of where I come from as far as the gamer. I hope that answers the question kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about what's next for you, or maybe like it could be about your game development journey or more personal
Not. It
things?
could be, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be not that.
Well, honestly, these days, my life is starting to kind of pick back up on just my game dev career now that I've taken a bit of a break from the content update. All I think about these days is just my next game, and I won't talk too much about it because it's honestly just like a puzzle in my head right now that I'm piecing together, and I have a vision and I have an idea for the story, but I don't quite know what it is yet. But one thing I am planning to do with Smushy is I'm trying to expand Smushy and just this world that I've created that I think a lot of people resonate with. Since I'm not really working on the game anymore, I want to keep it going. So I'm trying to work on a new, I guess, brand for Smushy almost, a new
Hmm.
social media account where I start uploading not necessarily game stuff for Smushy, but just drawings and comics and maybe fun little animations that I can do. And if that picks up, maybe I could have some sort of little store where I can sell like Smushy merch online. That's something that I'm definitely planning to focus on quite soon, alongside with my next game. And yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to jumping back on to social media and surprising everyone with like, hey, this is the next game I've been working on. It's going to be pretty different from Smushy if I run with this idea, and I hope that people are going to stick along with the journey, even though it's a bit different. But yeah, I'm looking forward to working on something new and also keeping Smushy close to me by trying something different with it.
Sounds like the best of both worlds. Like I'm
Yeah.
excited to see more about the world of Smushy, but also what's next from you in your next game.
If I may lob a thought, a passing thought out there, I feel like if you took a circle that is the art style of Smushy Come Home, the concept of the cute character, and then my impression of most Smushy enjoyers, there's like a center right in the middle, and it includes a Smushy Come Home board game. And I don't know how to
Oh,
design a board game, but I know that it would be heckin' cute.
That would be amazing.
that's actually, I actually have thought of that. Yeah, I haven't really thought about the board game route that much, and that's gonna have to go on my list now because
Okay.
I do enjoy some board games. It's something that me and Phil Positive play quite a lot. He's a big board game guy, and he got me
Ooh.
into it.
Maybe
And I
music
do
can
see
play as you move your piece along the board.
Yeah, that'd be
Since-
amazing. Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Well,
Maybe something I could kickstart.
when it happens, we'll credit DiscoCola
I
partially
don't need
with
credit.
the idea.
There we go. There we go.
That's what I think. Noah, it's been wonderful to hear from you about your game development, about Smushy Come Home. Thank you for all those insights and the stories. That was all so fascinating.
Yeah.
Right now, we're going to move on to our next segment with you, which is reviewing the game you chose from our list, which is Katana Zero. It is our featured game. Katana Zero is an action platformer with an emphasis on narrative. It was developed by ASCII Soft and published by Devolver Digital. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Katana Zero is a stylish neo-noir action platformer featuring breakneck action and instant death combat, slash dash, and manipulate time to unravel your past in a beautifully brutal acrobatic display. End quote. That was a lot of words. That was a tongue twister in places. So Katana Zero is a side-scrolling action game that's set in a metropolis about 7 years after a war that led to many of the game's events. We play as Subject Zero, an assassin with a katana who frequently experiences nightmares and problems with his memory. And Zero is dreaming about all kinds of troubling things. This child in a hut who is running or hiding from something, a scientist who is killed by a soldier, and other things he can't explain. And between the chapters of the game, Zero visits with his psychiatrist, who injects Zero with a drug of some kind, which may or may not be complicating matters in Zero's life. Who's to say? I don't know. Maybe it is. And Zero is not only suffering from amnesia, but experiences precognition and can slow down time. And the psychiatrist we visit with is also who gives Zero his assassination missions. So the psychiatrist is very much like informing the structure of the levels and sort of is the reason why we know who we're targeting. At the end of the chapters, Zero will often return home to his apartment where he drinks herbal tea and listens to the news. And there are some other notable characters, including V, who is a vicious Russian gangster. There's an unnamed little girl who appears to live in the same apartment building as Zero. And Zero's goals become to fulfill the assassination contracts given to him, as well as learn about his past and the meaning of his dreams. I would say this game is very thick with lore and backstory and conversation choices that guide the narrative into being something much more than just an action game. But I would also say the story, the plot goes hand in hand with the action, and the action is a huge part of the identity of this game. So I'll throw it over to Disco to talk about what we do in the action.
Yeah, so in Katana Zero, you have a lot of really, really great platforming controls. You have your main attack. This is your katana. This can be activated on the ground or in the air, and even more. Like you have like an upward kind of slash kind of thing. And in my opinion, easily the most enjoyable control of the game is just using your katana. The katana can also deflect bullets if you time it right. You can jump, you can wall jump, you can wall slide, you can pick up throwable items like bottles, knives, Molotov cocktails. There are also interactable buttons that maybe can trigger traps for your foes or turn off obstacles for yourself. You also get access to the aforementioned time slow mechanic. And this is basically what allows you to access the actual possibility of deflecting bullets at your enemies with guns or otherwise just making it easier to complete Katana Zero because you're up against everybody. It's you against the world, baby, and everyone wants you dead. But it does come on like a rechargeable meter, so you can't just like endlessly use it and go
Right,
slow
you
mo
have to
through the whole
ration
level.
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then lastly, Bopo mentioned this, but there are time-based responses and dialogue that you can give, and these will change endings and change boss fights, or even what you learn about certain characters of the world around you. And you can choose to answer early and interrupt, sometimes when people are talking, and then this will have like a really cool visual effect and sort of allow you to create a different personality based on how you respond. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of the gameplay. That's most of what I feel is the most important parts of what you actually input into the game. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. I guess, Noah, anything overall, like story setting, gameplay wise, you would say to introduce this to somebody that we missed?
I think you guys, honestly, you guys really, really did nail it. It's just one of those games where the story is kind of put into the combat so perfectly, in my opinion. The gameplay just loops around it, and yeah, it's just one of those games where it's like fast paced, and at one moment you're at the edge of your seat running through a level, and the next minute you are like super into this conversation with no voice acting, but so much character. And you're led with all these choices, and you're thinking about what choice did I just make? What would the previous one have done? What happens if I interrupt this conversation? Is he going to get angry with me? What kind of character do I want to play as? How is this going to affect the story? I mean, your mind is just racing through this game, and it's one of the reasons why I love it so much. It just has so much depth. And on top of that, it's absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous pixel art. I mean, oh my god. I don't play that many 2D pixel art games these days like I used to, but man, that is like it's just timeless, that the art that they did.
So we already know you love it because you picked it from our lists. Before we ask you why you picked it from our lists, we just want to mention that it was developed by Justin Stander under the name ASCIIsoft, with some assistance from others on art and music. And Katana Zero was a critical and financial success. It was nominated for several industry awards the year it came out. DLC was announced, I think, in 2019 with no release date. And here in late 2024, there's still no hint that the DLC is coming soon. But Stander has said that the DLC will be very significant and will expand the story and world building setup in the base game. So this will be something that for Katana Zero fans will be substantial. And so that's really exciting too. So we hope that will come out. And you know what? In the world of podcasting, sometimes doing a podcast about a game sort of manifests things.
That's true. It's happened.
It's happened.
Like four separate, really significant times in our history.
We've talked about games where we say, gosh, I wish this game was on this platform, or I wish this game got this update. And then Noah, within like 2 months, it happens. So
Oh my god.
I'd like to think that the three of us will help this happen. We'll see.
Please,
yes,
let's
please. But Noah, I think I first learned about Katana Zero because Katana Zero was like sponsoring in Games Done Quick events, like at SGDQ or an AGDQ. I remember seeing Katana Zero was like a presenting partner or some kind of a sponsor. So that's what put it on my radar. Noah, what put it on your radar, and why did you pick Katana Zero from our list?
I'll be honest with you, I think it was literally just a random Steam suggestion for me. It was back in 2020. It was like late winter 2020 or early winter, I guess, February, whatever that is. Like January, February, that time. Yeah, and I was just kind of browsing through Steam. I clicked on it because I love pixel art. I love 2D platformer style games, and the trailer, man, they did a good job with that trailer because it just hooks you in, primarily with the music and the aesthetic, and you're just like, whoa, what is going on here? This is deep. The song is just super rich, and this gameplay looks crazy. I buy right now, immediate. Yeah, it was awesome.
Sweet. So Noah, you've already kind of hinted at some of the reasons why you love Katana Zero, but could you just walk us through more of your overall thoughts on this game and just why you love it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very unique game. Not a lot of games have this sort of mechanic where you're kind of slowing down time to deflect bullets and platform and dodge and bob and weave. And when you lose a level, basically when you die, you kind of reset time and you try again. Oh, that didn't work. You need to go through this way or that way. Maybe you need to grab that knife and throw it this time. It's strange. It's like a mixture of having really good timing, but also be very strategic about, okay, I need to grab this object. I need to kill this guy first because that guy is going to shotgun me. And the only way you know that is by dying, and then trying again. So it's got a pretty difficult curve to it, I would say, but you get the hang of it. And when you start flowing through levels without any deaths, it feels like you're surfing. It's just like so smooth, and the soundtrack to it all is every level has like a super cool soundtrack, and you pop a cassette in right before you go into a level, and it's like super retro.
Hell yeah.
Just such a cool vibe to the game. Oh my god, I hope one day I can make a game just like that, aesthetically cool. It's just such a great game. I think it's something that a lot of people should give a try, no matter what genre you're into. It's got the great story. It's got really cool dialogue. It's got dialogue branching. It's got combat. It's got cool cutscenes. It's got optional content as well, depending on your decisions. Like it really just has everything to it. I just can't recommend it enough, really. It's such a good game and it's criminally underpriced for what it offers. And yeah, it's like you said, they're still working on a DLC, I believe. I mean, once you play the game, you'll know why you need a DLC and why we're all still here waiting, 5 years after the game's come out. We're still waiting for it anxiously because it's just such a gripping story and it needs to go further. It really does. I have no idea what they'll do with it. The game still sticks with me with how it. I don't want to spoil anything, but just with how it ends.
Yeah, definitely. And so you obviously played it, years ago. You've replayed it for this recording, so it's kind of fresh in your mind.
Mhm.
Replaying it again, do you have any dislikes or anything for this game?
Honestly, it's really just so well rounded to me. I'm the type of guy that enjoys much shorter games when it comes to story-based games. I can play a roguelite for 40, 50 hours. I can play like a sandbox game for 100 hours with friends. But when it comes to like a single player experience, I can't do like a Souls-like where it takes 40 hours to play,
Oh,
things like that.
yeah.
As much as I do think those games are super cool, absolutely amazing games. One of the things I love about Katana Zero is that it's just so you can kind of beat it in like 5 or 6 hours, really, depending on the dialogue choices that you make. And I love that. I love how it's just this short, sweet experience, like you just watched a movie and you're ready for the sequel now. Um, Honestly, majority of the time I was replaying it, I was now going into it as a game
Mm.
dev. I was thinking like, "Oh my god, this must have been a nightmare to translate and program all these dialogue branches." And then they also had specific dialogue that was written if you cut them off at this time. Like, whoa! I was just so incredibly impressed with the dialogue. I already loved it the first time, but going back to it 4 years later, I was just like, "This is insane. There's so much to this game. So much to this game." I guess the only thing that really like ticked me off at times was just getting frustrated with like a level that's just super difficult, but at the same
Mhm.
time, like it makes it super satisfying once you beat it.
Yeah, this game makes you feel powerful. Like, even when it's beating you down, when you finally, surmount that challenge, you're like, "I feel like a
Mhm,
superhero." That's how I feel
mhm.
anyway.
Mhm.
Um,
Definitely.
cool. Well, are you prepared to give a score for the game out of 10?
Ooh, man. I was thinking about this one. Um, it's just so difficult to score. For me, it's like a 9.5 out of 10, you know?
Amazing.
It's just so it really just checks all my boxes. The only reason why I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10 is because I can only give that to Pikmin games.
Ah,
Because
that's fair. Yeah. And everybody has their own rubric, and
Yeah.
everybody looks at games differently, which makes a score, a score doesn't tell you the whole story about someone's opinion, but it is a nice little
Yeah.
snapshot. It still tells a story. And I think that's
Mhm.
fascinating too.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Thank you for sharing about your enthusiasm with us. Uh, DiscoCola, how about your overall thoughts?
All right. Like some humble onion said, the music in this is really good. I think the music is awesome. It also plays well into the cassette tape aesthetic of the beginning of each level, and I don't have super easy access to the soundtrack as a standalone sound, but I recall like all of it sounding really good while I was actually playing the game, and I would love to play this on the radio a ton. So,
Oh, yeah.
looking forward to doing that at some point. Visually, no secret around here at Underplayed. I love 2D pixel art games. It's sort of my jam. And then when you also have the pinks and the blues and the stuff that Katana Zero has in spades, you're touching all the right buttons right
Yeah.
there. So I think everything just looks totally awesome all the time. I think the controls feel great at nearly all times. I think this is an example of a game that you could play without a goal. Like if
Hmm.
the dev team had like a daily level. I don't enjoy like daily challenge things in games, but I think if they had a daily level, that's something that I would enjoy because just the controls feel good to play without a
Mhm.
goal in mind.
Yeah.
And
That sounds like something that could be very possible.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be super
Mhm.
fun. Additionally, another thing I don't always care about so much in games, like if we think back to Super Hot, you could finish the level and watch back everything that you did. I watch that sometimes, but a lot of the time I just wanted to get done with Super Hot. In the case of Katana Zero, I really love watching most of my playbacks, especially if I was using that slowdown function a lot,
Yeah.
because I think the slowdown function, I don't know, it's hard to compare it to why I like it so much more in this than I do in Super Hot. But just the amount that you slow down and what you can accomplish while you're slowed down, I guess, makes a huge difference. And so when you watch that back at full speed, it's incredible. And I think that's so awesome to watch. Another thing that I love are the boss fights in this game. I actually love almost all of the boss fights. I think they're all really rad. It kind of reminds me of Fury, but like much more reasonable and enjoyable. And I would just take more of the boss fights.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I would do way more of them.
Noah Disco has like a big Mega Man background, loves boss fights of all kinds. And
Nice.
every time I fought a boss in this game, I thought of you.
Oh,
for sure.
That's excellent. Thank you.
I was like, this is DiscoCola coded right now.
Yeah. I was gonna say, did you by chance fight the ridiculously difficult optional
The
boss?
like secret ending
The secret
boss?
final boss.
Yeah,
No,
the
I
secret.
didn't even know about it until after I'd finished the game.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah, same here.
You have to satisfy like certain dialogue requirements that you just don't know about unless you look it up ahead of time. But I think,
you gotta
we're all
look it up,
aware of
honestly.
Yeah. Someday maybe I'll go back to that, but it's not something I'm in a hurry to do. But just, going back to the Mega Man thing, the boss that has like the laser gun or whatever is just like a boss in Mega Man 04.
Yep.
And I loved that
Totally.
I not only made that connection, but that it was actually better in Katana Zero. And I had a lot of fun fighting that boss when I didn't enjoy it in Mega Man 04. So
That's high praise from
yeah,
Disco.
it was really awesome.
Yeah.
As far as things I don't like, some sections of a level are just a little bit too long, in my opinion. I can kill something like 13 people, but then if I accidentally die because I didn't time my dash through the laser at the right time or whatever, I can end up like literally back at the beginning.
That's a huge bummer.
And I just that kind of sucks. Like I know that what you guys said earlier was true. Once you do finish that, it's like a huge sense of accomplishment. But there were like 2 subsections of a level where I was like, man,
You're basically there.
flip your shoes level.
and
like
then it's taken from you.
I didn't even watch the replay. I was just like, that one's done. I'm done with that one. So I moved on. The story, there's just part of the story that involves like hallucinogenic kind of reality bending kind of things. And I pretty quickly lost track of what was real and what isn't. And then at the end of the game, you kind of get like a to be continued. And then there's like a lot of like nebulous things to start with. So I don't always need like stuff told to me all the time. Like you can show me things or things can be left to interpretation for me. But there's a lot of it that happens in Katana Zero, and I can't always tell what is real and what isn't.
Yeah, this is a subjectively told story. This is subjective storytelling, like to the nth degree. It isn't just you're playing one chapter or episode that's disorienting, but you play multiple chapters that sort of bleed into each other, and you start to lose sense of time and space. And I think that's maybe an intent of the developer and the storytelling, but nonetheless disorienting and hard to follow.
Yeah, definitely.
The last thing I want to point out here is stealth. I don't like doing stealth sections. The combat in the game is just so well programmed. And then it's like, hey, do some stealth. And it's like someone gave me like $300. They brought me to a toy store, but then they told me I couldn't buy any Transformers or robots of any kind. So I'm like, I have all this like awesome stuff at my disposal, but there's just like literally nothing I can do with it. I just have to like go really, really slow and duck at the right time. And that just, I didn't enjoy that part of the game.
Yeah. Or if you're like me, you wildly forget that you're supposed to be stealthy and then you get in trouble, and then you get your hands slapped.
Honestly, the only reason why, because I'm right there with you, Disco, I really hate stealth missions. Oh my God. The only reason why I got through them with in Katana Zero is because when you are stealthing in that one level with the when you're in the rave. In order to be stealth, he just starts breaking out a dance move. That like
funny,
for me,
yeah.
I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
It's pretty charming. Yeah.
They actually
Yeah.
they programmed that into my secret game that I talked about earlier in this episode too, which is pretty funny that I didn't make that connection quite
Interesting.
until just now.
Interesting
but-
synergy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, in the end, Katana Zero is a game that I enjoyed at most times. I really appreciated being able to sort of like insert myself into the character with so many dialogue options. Like I noticed that one day I was a little bit more short with my psychiatrist because I was feeling impatient that day.
Whoa.
And other days
Yeah.
I was just like really compassionate and slow and listening.
Huh.
And whenever I had like dialogue options with the little girl, I was always like,
You're probably thinking about your daughter.
I'm just being really patient all the time and trying to listen to the full story and just be kind at all times. But, I still don't know what all the differences these choices make overall, but I do get to at least respond in the way that I would personally respond at that given time. The controls are rad. The relationship between the main character and the child has me particularly invested in this game. And while I don't always need things fed to me in the story department, giving me that to be continued at the end of an indie game kind of feels like a shaky promise, especially when I can't totally track all of the moving pieces of the story in the first place. With the exception of the prison level, I enjoyed playing through Katana Zero, regardless of how lost I was in the story.
Mhm.
So I give Katana Zero an 8.5 for me out of 10.
Wonderful. Awesome
Nice.
positive score for DiscoCola. And spoiler alert, it's going to be 3 for 3 on the positive scores because I just think this is a tight, perfectly paced package. I love the tone and the vibe of this noir setting. So this world feels nasty. It feels like a world that chews people up and spits them back out. And
Mhm.
it's grungy. It's dangerous. Parts feel supernatural even. So it feels like a place that could exist, but also it couldn't exist for a couple reasons.
Mhm.
And I just love how the tone and the setting combine to create a world that feels so thought out. Every inch of this game feels measured and considered and like there was a choice made on every screen about what's where and who says what. There's tons of personality through the characters and the dialogue, the sound and art direction too. Noah, like you said, despite it not having dialogue that's spoken, we get tons of personality out of these
Mhm.
characters through the way they carry themselves and through the words
And through
animated on
how the
screen.
word, through their animations.
How the words animate
yeah.
on screen. I also love the music, the electronic and synth pop reinforce the action. I feel just gassed up when I am doing this
That's a
action.
good
And
word
there's
for it. Yeah.
there's an awesome soundtrack behind what I'm doing. Katana Zero is filled with set pieces. Just set piece after set piece and interesting moment after interesting moment. And every chapter feels distinct. And when I go to chapter select, I instantly remember what each chapter is about. I could go to like, oh yeah, that chapter's this. Oh yeah, that chapter's that. That's where I did that. So no moment is wasted. No chapter's wasted. The gameplay is incredibly tight, just like you both have said. When I fail in this game, I pretty much always can only blame myself because I just didn't turn around at the right moment or I didn't ration out the items in the correct way. I didn't throw the thing at the guy who I should have thrown the thing at. I know what I did immediately. So I do fail quite a lot. But it's because of me and because I need to remember the right sequence of moves to make. And it just feels really good to pull that off. Slowing time and deflecting bullets is probably my favorite feeling thing in this game. Every time it happens, again, I just feel powerful. I feel like a superhero. When I get to things that I don't jive with as much in Katana Zero, it really just has to do with the plot. The plot of Katana Zero is one I don't fully connect with. This is a me thing. But when there's a story about a protagonist whose sort of deal hinges on not knowing who they are, or maybe they're struggling with reality, sometimes those stories are hard for me to care about because I don't start knowing enough about them. So in this case, I feel like I don't start knowing a lot about Zero in a way that makes me care about what happens to Zero. We eventually learn more, and there's a lot of great backstory, and things are tied together really helpfully. But when I don't have that starting point where I know definitely like, who is this guy? It's hard for me to fall in love with what then happens.
Now that you're saying it like that, I find that I didn't care as much about Zero myself either, but I cared a lot about the people around him. Like, oh, I hope it goes well for this person. I hope this guy gets his head smashed in.
Right. Yeah.
So I cared more about the surroundings.
That's true for me too. I felt empathy for the
Yeah.
girl in the apartment building, and I hated V like with a passion, like I just wanted V to go away, and then he keeps coming back. So
Yeah.
I feel strong emotions. It's just the person at the center of it all. I don't always feel a lot with him, and I wish I'd felt a little more to start off. Also, there are some character intentions that I don't really understand, like the characters V and Snow when they're together. I don't always know like what their deal is, what their backstory is. And honestly, it's kind of a lot of characters to cram into a game that's only several hours long. So
Yeah.
I do kind of lose track of things here. But I think the noir vibe, just sort of like as a baseline emotion, holds strong. And I come to this noir story loving it for the vibes mostly. So overall, I think there's an incredible amount of personality here for a 2D game, and that personality comes out through tight gameplay and stunning art and a soundscape that draws you in. I totally understand why the story resonates with other people, but it's a large chunk of the game that I personally don't love naturally. So, for all those reasons, I'm going to score it an 8 out of 10, which is still a positive score, and I had an awesome time every single moment I was playing this game. And now I'm just curious, Noah, how Katana Zero stands out in the side-scrolling action genre. It's probably a safe assumption that we've all played a lot of these games, but how does Katana Zero stand out from other ones?
That's a good question. I mean, I think definitely for one, the time slowing mechanic is one that not a lot use, and it uses it really well to its advantage. I think the story is also quite different from a lot of 2D side scrollers. Kind of like you were mentioning, the overall vibe of this game is very unique. It really does a good job with like getting the setting right and the world. And like you guys had both mentioned, the plot is definitely confusing and can be difficult to attach to. But the world building around it and the characters, it's not something you see quite often in a 2D side scroller. And I think that really does like make it stand out, and it also kind of shows that games of this genre can really go in any direction. And it's just really cool to see it be taken that way. I hope to see more games kind of be made from Katana Zero, like kind of inspiration wise. I'm even heavily inspired by it. I would love to make a game with more of a darker story,
Hmm.
kind of something like that. But yeah, I feel like it just does a really good job of being a really good 2D side scroller, but standing out and having its own vibe and taking elements from other games and putting it into the 2D world and then just doing it so perfectly.
Jumping off what you said there, I think because I've now played Katana Zero, whenever I play another 2D action game, I'll probably always think back to Katana Zero and basically think of the potential of 2D action games differently now that I've played this. Because I can always say like, oh, that's very interesting, but I've played Katana Zero. Like, what if it did this? One thing that struck me going throughout was just how much character, how much emotion is portrayed through the animation of text. How text is colored on screen, what happens to text. Sometimes text explodes and the characters fly all over the screen because someone's been killed. Lots of these kinds of things happen. For inspiration for you as a game designer, I'm just wondering, is it a coincidence that Smushy Come Home has like animated text too? Not quite in the same ways, but I just noticed that in Smushy Come Home, when you're talking to characters, they express a lot through how the words appear.
Yeah, that is, the writing in Smushy was one of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite things to work on. And one of the things I really wanted to make sure it was done right, because I really, really wanted these characters to have strong personalities. And it's difficult to do that sometimes in games when you don't have voice acting. Katana Zero was an inspiration for that. I honestly didn't think back on it too much, but definitely when I would think about characters kind of like exploding or something like that, like having a meltdown and Smushy, I would think about how they do it in Katana Zero, how they would play that gunshot sound effects and the words would pop up on the screen and they'd be shaking and they'd be a different color or something like that. They did such a good job with that. And I think also with how the characters looked in the game, you could also get a good personality, like vibe. You could kind of tell what kind of accent this dude was talking in, how he was talking.
Mm.
But what just really like drove it home was how the text was animated and displayed. It was shaky, it was exploding, it was different colors, it was wavy. It just kind of like really, really helped bring it home and like sell the character and give that personality. And yeah, I tried to do a similar thing in Smushy. It's definitely not as explosive as it is in Katana Zero. And honestly, when I was replaying it, it kind of made me look back on some of my writing and think, maybe I should have done a little bit more with the animations on the characters. Because yeah, they just did a really good job with it.
Then there's the words you read sometimes that sort of catch me off guard. And for me, what stands out from other action games sometimes is just like what I'm reading and how vulgar it can be sometimes. And like, I streamed this whole game on Twitch, and it's my first time playing. I'm playing in front of my community, and I kind of start to feel bad a little bit when I'm reading stuff that V is saying. Like, he's saying really nasty things at a particular moment I'm thinking of in a limousine. And then also in a room. I guess it happens a lot with that character, but
the guy sucks.
Yes, and like I'm reading this stuff out loud, and I'm kind of like softening how I say it because I just want to get through the moment too. So I have to take a moment and say, "This is not me. This is not me. I'm just reading these words in a game that I've never
Don't
played
let anyone
before."
cut that out.
Yeah. Disco, anything jumping out at you as standing out in the action genre?
I guess just it's a top tier example of creating smooth controls. Like if your jump is just a little bit too floaty, that is the first domino that cascades into just having a bad time. And then if you add a lot of difficult combat on top of that, it makes the whole game a bad experience. But I think the controls in this are just so tight. So as far as how it stands out in side-scrolling action games, which I played a lot of, I think the controls are top tier.
Yeah, I trust your assessment on that for sure. Just knowing how much you've played. There's the experimental sense of time and how it affects both the story and the gameplay. And I guess I'm just curious about any observations here. Any more, I guess, anecdotes about that disorienting time you had with those several chapters in a row that sort of bleed together?
The one example that stands out the most isn't necessarily related to time, but related to two characters that show up, which I assumed to be figments of my imagination, but then they show up at a certain point in the game and interact with characters around me. And
comedy and tragedy.
Yeah, that's the point where I start to like get the most disoriented and just like it was less about time and more about what's real.
Yeah,
because I'm not sure.
For sure.
Yeah, same here. When they get introduced and pretty much any scene that they show up, it definitely throws you in a loop. And you're like, okay, what's going on now? Is this me? Is this the drug? Is this happening? Is this not? Is this going to make me do something that I shouldn't do? Did I actually do the thing that I shouldn't have done? Like, yeah, it was part of the fun of it, but also like, yeah, it can be a little too much, a little too confusing.
There's a little bit of a prophecy that happens with those characters, and that's where I thought the game almost felt like Shakespearean in a way, where like we're going to stop the action that's going on, and now we're going to have like this, this story moment, this exposition, and we're sort of like breaking the fourth wall, but in a different way, in a new way. And in 3 days this will happen, and then I'm thinking about that in the back of my mind now. Whenever it happens, that feels like something that would happen in just like an experimental stage play or something.
Yeah, that's so true.
So I had a hard time with this, but there are dialogue options that we can take. Is there anything that stands out to you, like how it impacted the story, or at least maybe you think impacted the story. I can think of like one example, but I'm curious about first you, Noah, if you have one.
I can't think of one necessarily in particular. Definitely the dialogue with the little girl. I was always very careful with because I was curious if it was going to alter the story with her, and I didn't want to like. I started feeling very protective of her. You know, she was just such a like, she was just such a cool little character that you didn't want anything to happen to. There's also a lot of like dialogue in the game that just, depending on what you select, it makes a totally different impression on a character that's just not important at all. And I kind of like that. Like I remember the first time I played, there was that little that receptionist, and you talk to her, and she's like, "What's up with your outfit?" And I think I just like breezed by her the first time I played, and then when I replayed it recently, I chose the option where I said I was a cosplayer, and all of a sudden she like lights up and she's like, "Whoa, you watch anime?" And then it's like, "Yeah, we can watch anime together sometime." And she's like, "Oh my god, yay!" And she like completely changes characters from being this like
Whoa.
super bored receptionist to this like rainbow text. Like she lights up, her whole sprite changes.
That's
Yeah,
fascinating to hear because I didn't see that side of her at all.
yeah,
Because when I talked to her, she asked like, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I thought the dialogue option of then this is after I'd gone through that level and you actually return and you
yeah.
encounter her again. You can admit to killing tons of people. I thought, what happens if I do that? And I did that, and then she ran away, and then she died because she wasn't supposed to hear any of that.
Whoa.
Oh,
So that's
whoa,
an instance I didn't know your side of things there. I only knew my side. So
whoa.
that is an instance I know where you can make a dramatic difference in how you respond to people. So yeah, that's wild to me.
Yeah, I did the third option where I was just like, I'm here to take a shower.
Right, which is probably really casual, and she's just like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
like when I needed an alibi, she was like, "Yeah, he was here taking a shower." I'm like, "Cool, nailed it."
So all three of us chose differently in that moment.
Isn't that crazy? Like,
Wow.
that's why I love that game. The dialogue choices actually make really big differences.
They do. I know about a couple of others. There's a very obvious one. It's with Comedy and Tragedy, who we were just talking about. During the Chinatown mission, I chose, they give you life or death, and it's pretty obvious what you'll get. I chose death first because I thought it was more intriguing to choose death.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is what I chose on stream. And I got credits way sooner than the life choice. The credits start rolling.
Oh my God.
You die and you see credits. And there's like another hour or two of game after that.
Yeah, that's the first thing I
Yeah.
did too. I did it twice actually, because I was like,
Okay.
I wonder if something different happens the second time, just because sometimes extra content is hidden behind that. But
Yeah.
um,
That's crazy.
the one that I think of most distinctly is with DJ Electrohead, actually,
Oh.
because through a lot of the game up to that point, I was like trying to follow the mission specifications as best as I can. But
This is the one where they're like, don't listen to him.
don't talk to
Don't
him.
talk to
Don't
him.
even talk to him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I don't like to listen to authority anyway. So I like, I'm choosing the less violent option. And so I talked to him, but I only talked to him for a little bit, and then I did kill him. But the psychiatrist still gets like super mad at you because he finds out that you talk to him, and you learn about something that, I learned about something that I guess I'm not supposed to learn about until way later in the game because
Oh,
I
yeah.
talked to him. There, I guess, are just revelations later that just mean a lot less because I talked to him.
Sure.
Mhm.
But that's the choice I made because that's the choice I would have made.
That's another choice that differs from what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't
same
know
here.
that happened. Similarly, you made me think of Josh Rose, who's one of the first contracts. And Josh says, "I won't give you the satisfaction of killing me." And then you can immediately choose kill him, which I did. And I think I accidentally chose this because I had my finger on the button and I just accidentally pressed it. And I was like, "Oh no, don't kill him." But then he jumps off the building.
hmm
And so
Yeah.
so you sort of intimidate him, you provoke him into jumping. So I don't know what I missed from that moment.
Same thing happened to me.
To
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
to-
same.
So okay, that's one where we all align.
Yeah.
So to this day, we don't know like what he would have told us.
I did watch a
Interesting.
video and I already forgot what happens,
okay.
but I did watch a video.
That's
It's
so
just so
fascinating.
crazy. That's one of the reasons why I love that game, and it's actually crazy that you're able to have so many different experiences if you just play it one time. Like we've all had different experiences with different characters and stuff like that, and yet the game is still so well received, which just goes to show how thought out I think they did a lot of those dialogue choices and where the story goes depending on what you choose. Like no matter what you choose, it kind of just blends in with the rest of the game almost, or it just does something totally crazy where you're just like, wow, that was just so different. I loved it.
Let's talk about how we approached combat. I found that my skills evolved over time, but it's not like we get different skills as we go throughout. We're not getting skill points. We're not choosing a build. What we start the game with is sort of what we have with us throughout. We might find different items to throw here and there, but really it's just the environments and the enemies that are changing and then how we react to that. So how did, your skills evolve? What did you do differently over time or what did you get better at over time?
I think you definitely get better at working with the changing environment. Because kind of like you said, that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things I really love about the game is how they managed to make the combat so well without rewarding you with upgrades.
Mm,
That's just one of the most common things you do in game design to keep the player more interested in progressing and keep the combat more interesting is providing upgrades. And they didn't do any of that. Instead, they just almost upgraded the levels and made them more interesting or more difficult or, different things to watch out for. And instead, you just kind of get better and better at learning the layouts of the levels quicker and knowing what to expect now in this new environment because you kind of saw what they did previously. And it's like a weird way of getting better at a game.
yeah.
It's like you're getting better at the level design of all things
Yeah. I guess
and not the
that's
combat.
I guess that's how it would be for an actual assassin.
Yeah.
Like I've been in a place like this before. This is how I'm going to sneak around, or this is how I'm going to jump around.
Hmm.
For me, at first, I would just like, as soon as I get close to an enemy, I would initiate the time slow just to make sure that I am timing my katana right. But as I get further and further in the game, my mind is moving less from that and more toward analyzing the individual threat level of each individual enemy on the screen. Because
Mm,
some enemies have firepower that is very difficult to dodge, and some enemies have firepower that is a little bit easier to dodge, and some are like melee attackers. And so
Yeah.
I sort of just analyze the threat level and try to take them out in order from most threatening to least,
yeah.
which is also probably something a real assassin would do.
Yeah. Probably that
Yeah.
does make sense. I think I became more comfortable with uh, doing chains of dashing and then deflecting bullets. Early on,
Yeah.
I was really only dashing through things and then trying to backstab stuff or deflecting bullets. But then the more shotgun guys they throw at you, which you can't really deflect,
Hmm.
mixed among machine gun guys and other enemies, the more I had to mix and match the moves. And so I found as I went throughout, I was slowing down time, dashing through stuff, rolling, if you will, and then deflecting a bullet. Then I might, backstab someone, roll again, deflect again. And so that comfort came with time, which was really cool.
Definitely. Yeah.
So moving on to memorable moments or sequences. What stands out to you the most?
Ooh, I honestly, one of the things that stood out to me the most in the game was when you play as, I forget what his name was, just that absolute
Oh,
overpowered guy.
It's
subject
like
15.
15, right?
Subject
Yeah.
15.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I love when games do that. When you've been playing as one character for so long, you've started getting really attached to their play style, and then they throw you in on this like side story or something like that where you're playing as a totally different character and they're just like god mode and you just it's just
Yeah.
so much fun. And I mean, despite them being god mode, I still died a bunch because all of a sudden you're like, how do I control this? But that was a moment that really stood out to me that I was not expecting at all. And I love it when games do that, when they throw in just something totally different. You get to play as a totally different character, and for a moment there, it's just like a breath of fresh air, and it's just a lot of fun. That was something that I always kind of think about when I think back to the game, and it's like I would love to do that in a game someday.
Hell yeah. That, again, that's a set piece and it's
Mhm.
short and sweet. And I would take a whole game where you play as Subject 15, but I also
Yeah.
super appreciate that they're disciplined in only allowing us to do that for like 10 minutes because I feel like I'll remember it more. It'll be more special that way. It'll just like
Definitely.
live in my memory about that's not only what I got to do in the game, but that's also who this character is. This
Yeah.
character is that. So that was in my list. I have a list of moments and sequences. So that's definitely in my list. But another one I'll pick here, it's a smaller moment and it's kind of a world building moment, but I just find this to be so amusing. There are all the different kinds of criminals, and within the game, there are these basic enemies called Strong Terrys. But there's a
Uh-huh.
Strong Terry who's called Strong Terry. And he's commented upon by several people, and there are enemies who will comment on Strong Terry even after you've killed Strong Terry. So you can like just walk up behind Strong Terry and just kill him. And then there are people
Yeah.
who are talking about how bad Strong Terry is. And then it's like, wait, is that the guy who I killed like 10 minutes ago? So I love that moment. I love that just in a quick moment, we get insight into this character that we really don't need to know anything about, but it just adds
Mhm.
flavor to that section of the game.
Totally.
For me, I alluded to it earlier, but the boss fights,
Oh yeah.
especially the one I think it is the laser person. Just the way that that boss fight ends, also is quite shocking, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the boss fights in this game, with the exception of the like TV man trial. That I don't love that boss fight so much, but
Mm.
pretty much every other boss fight was just like really incredible to me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Noah, is there anything else about the game you want to shout out, praise, reminisce upon in this moment?
I could definitely keep gushing over it. Truly, it's just one of those indie gems to me that I can go back and play over and over again, and I will definitely be doing that. Honestly, like as we've been sitting here talking about it, it just makes me want to replay it again,
Oh.
even though I just did.
And you easily
Even
can because it's short enough.
yeah, again, that's the beauty of those short games, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted to make Smushy. Smushy might not be necessarily super replayable, but it's just something that you can beat it in one sitting, you can reach that end goal, and it's just nice and sweet, and you didn't spend 30 hours on it. It's just how I don't know. For me, it just totally does it. If you have not played the game yet, I just cannot recommend it enough to those listening. Just definitely go give it a play. If anything, go watch the trailer on Steam. And if the trailer doesn't hook you in, then it's just not the game for you. But if it does, it's only $15.
Yeah, everybody should look into this if they're interested in action games, interested in experimental stories for sure. Yeah, I have a couple people in mind that I'm definitely going to be recommending this to very
Mhm.
soon. We will begin to wrap up here then, Noah. Can you give listeners another pitch about your game and where to find your content online?
Yeah, definitely. So, once again, Smushy Come Home. If you're into cozy or casual adventure games without any combat, without any difficult stakes like that, it's pretty much the perfect game. It's just kind of a casual, cozy, chill exploration game. There is no fighting, there is no dying. It's not something that takes too long to beat, and there is educational value in the game as well with the mycology journal, letting you learn about real life mushrooms, letting you play as a sentient little 2-inch mushroom. It's a game that's very, very special to me, and I hope if you do end up playing it that you enjoy it, and definitely let me know what you think of it and a Steam review or hop in the Discord or just send me a DM, anything. I just always love hearing what people thought of the game. And you can reach me any social media. I'm on there pretty much. It's SomeHumbleOnion. That's just kind of my developer name. And I am working on more things. There are hopefully more things in the work for Smushy, maybe not necessarily in the form of a game, but just I want to keep Smushy out there. He's just a brave little mushroom, and I feel like he has more things to kind of share with people. And so hopefully I get to keep doing that some more. But yeah, that's about it.
Well, Noah, we want to wish you the best of luck with whatever's next on your journey. And we thank you so much for joining us today. This has been one of the most special moments of doing this podcast, and you're our first developer guest, not only this season, but on our show. So thank you for being our first guest of this kind.
That's awesome. No, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been so much fun, and you guys have been awesome hosts.
Awesome. We appreciate that. And if you ever just want to chat about games in the future, feel free to reach out. We'd love to chat with you again.
Yes, please do.
Totally.
Well, thank you for helping us to review Katana Zero. You can play Katana Zero on PC, Mac, Switch, Xbox One, Android, and iOS. Noah rated it a 9.5. DiscoCola rated it an 8.5. I rated it an 8. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. Underplayed is on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at UnderplayedPod. You can find me in those places at BoPo. That's BO_PO.
And I am at DiscoCola in all of those places. And you can find me on places like Backloggd, where both of today's games are added to my top 100 indie games list in various places. And look for Underplayed on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/underplayedpodcast, where we will be playing our co-op game probably around the time you're listening to this episode.
Next time, we'll have 2 more secret games to review, and our featured game will be Fez, a puzzle platformer developed by Polytron Corporation. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.